March 8th, 2014. It was a quiet Saturday night in Kuala Lumpur. At the international airport, the clock ticked past midnight. The world outside was calm, just another tropical night in Malaysia. Airport announcements echoed softly through the terminal. Most passengers were sleepy, some scrolling through their phones, others sipping coffee, waiting to board. Among them, 239 people, men, women, children, families heading home, businessmen chasing the next deal, tourists returning from a Southeast Asian adventure, and a seasoned crew led by Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a respected pilot with over 18,000 hours of flight experience. The aircraft? A Boeing 777-200ER, one of the safest planes ever built. Reliable, modern, trusted by airlines around the world. At 12:41 a.m., Flight MH370 lifted off from runway 32R. It pierced the night sky, climbing over the South China Sea, following a route that had been flown hundreds of times before. To Beijing, a 6-hour trip. Simple, uneventful. But this night would not be routine. Just 38 minutes into the flight at 1:19 a.m., something happened. Something irreversible. As the aircraft crossed from Malaysian airspace toward Vietnamese control, the co-pilot made what would be the last known voice transmission from the cockpit. Good night, Malaysian 370. And then, radio silence. The plane disappeared from civilian radar. No mayday, no squawk code, no sign of struggle, just gone. In the control rooms of Southeast Asia, air traffic controllers stared at empty radar screens, waiting for MH370 to check in with Vietnam. The expected handoff never came. Minutes turned into hours. Military radars caught a strange blip turning westward, a move completely off course. But no one knew what to make of it. Was it the plane? A malfunction? A ghost echo? By dawn, families were waking up to devastating silence. No messages, no updates, just missing loved ones and the terrifying unknown. Flight MH370 had simply vanished from the sky. In an age of smartphones, satellites, and constant surveillance, an entire jetliner had disappeared into the night without a trace. And that's when the world knew. This wasn't just a missing plane. This was the beginning of a mystery so vast, so haunting, it would echo for years to come. Flight MH370 was supposed to be forgettable. 239 souls on board, heading from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Routine, uneventful. Just another red-eye flight over calm waters. At 12:41 a.m., it lifted off the runway at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The sky was clear. The weather forecast? Smooth sailing. In the cabin, most passengers had settled into sleep. Some were sipping drinks, others texting a final message before takeoff restrictions kicked in. In the cockpit, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah and First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid were in calm, professional control. At 1:19 a.m., the final known words were transmitted. Good night, Malaysian 370, delivered in a composed voice. No sign of trouble, no urgency, no warning. Then, silence. At 1:22 a.m., the aircraft vanished from civilian radar. Not crashed, not exploded, just gone. As if someone had pulled the plane out of existence with a remote switch. Initially, this raised no alarm. It happens. Communication delays, technical glitches. Pilots might switch to another frequency, or radar might miss a ping. But then came the minutes. Long, agonizing minutes. No radio contact, no transponder signal, no response from the flight crew. Then something stranger. Malaysian military radar showed that MH370 had not disappeared. It had taken a hard turn west, doubling back over the Malaysian peninsula. The change wasn't a gentle drift or random meander. It was exact. Calculated. A turn only possible through deliberate action from inside the cockpit. It flew across Penang Island, Zahari's hometown. Some speculate he may have even dipped the wings in a silent goodbye, but no one knows for sure. The aircraft continued, crossing the Malacca Strait, then veering northwest toward the Andaman Sea. No radio signal, no transponder. Flying blind to the world. To the public, the plane was lost. To radar, it was still alive. And then, just as suddenly, it vanished again. This time without a trace. No distress call. No wreckage. Just silence. Forever. As the minutes turned into hours, the world began to grapple with a terrifying realization. Flight MH370 wasn't just lost. It had deliberately turned off its radar system, disappeared from the sky, and now it was just a mystery. Search efforts began almost immediately, but the vast emptiness of the Indian Ocean and the surrounding terrain made any hope of a quick resolution seem almost impossible. The initial assumption was that the plane had crashed somewhere over the South China Sea. But as days passed, the theory started to fray at the edges. Satellite data, something that was only available in hindsight, revealed a more disturbing truth. It wasn't a simple crash. MH370 wasn't just flying blind, it was alive. It was still flying. But where? How? And why? The plane's final hours weren't entirely unknown. In fact, a series of automated satellite pings continued to send signals from the aircraft's satellite communication system. These pings suggested that MH370 stayed airborne for much longer than anyone first imagined. A dozen pings were sent, each one indicating the plane's position. The data told investigators that the aircraft had been in the air for almost 7 hours, far beyond the fuel capacity of a normal flight. But here's where the puzzle begins. The pings, though they provided a location, didn't reveal much else. They only proved the plane was flying across an enormous stretch of ocean. No specific flight path, no exact altitude, no communication from the pilots. All the world knew, based on these pings, was that MH370 was somewhere in the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean. An ocean that spans over 70 million square kilometers. No wreckage, no debris. Only the cold silence of the sea. Satellite data from the British company Inmarsat helped to narrow down the search area. It led authorities to a region of the ocean known as the Southern Indian Ocean, but the distance between each ping was so wide that it left no certainty in its wake. The search zone was enormous, stretching thousands of miles, as vast as the mystery itself. But there were still no answers. The plane was still gone. How could something so large, so significant, disappear without a trace? Some experts began to speculate. Had the plane crashed somewhere at sea, or had it simply glided for hours on autopilot, eventually running out of fuel? Theories started to shift, blending into one another, until the question arose: was there something more sinister at play? Was it possible that the disappearance of MH370 was part of a larger conspiracy? The lines between fact and speculation blurred, but the facts were undeniably chilling. A plane had disappeared, and the truth seemed as elusive as the ocean itself. It wasn't until more than a year later that the first real clue emerged. A small piece of wreckage, a flaperon, washed up on the shores of Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean. This was it. The first physical evidence of MH370, a fragment of a plane. It was a tiny part of something much larger, but it was enough to reignite the search. For a while, hope surged. This was tangible proof, wasn't it? If they could find one piece, surely they could find more. The question was, What had happened to the rest of the aircraft? The flaperon, a movable part of the wing, had been clearly identified as part of the Boeing 777 family, the same as MH370. But while it provided a glimmer of hope, it also raised more questions. How could a single piece from such a large aircraft wash up so far from the search zone? How did it end up there? And what did it tell us about where the rest of the wreckage could be? Theories started to develop, some of them dark, others more practical. Was it possible that the aircraft had crashed, scattered its parts, and the ocean currents had carried the wreckage thousands of miles away? Or was it possible the flaperon had been placed deliberately, a cruel act meant to mislead and deceive the investigators? As more debris washed ashore, a suitcase, a window frame, pieces of a wing, the questions grew. Could the debris be proof of a crash, or was something far more sinister taking place? Was someone trying to cover up the truth? Were these pieces planted, or had they been lost and dispersed by the ocean? Theories began to overlap. The search continued, with investigators scouring the ocean floor, hoping for more pieces of the plane. But with each discovery, the mystery only deepened. No one could be sure if the debris was an accident or part of a far more calculated plot. Despite the ongoing recovery of fragments, the absence of larger wreckage and the failure to find the main body of the plane led to suspicions. How could such a large, modern aircraft disappear without leaving more clues? Why were there no large parts of the fuselage? Why were there no bodies? What if MH370 hadn't crashed at all? What if the debris was staged? What if someone knew the answers all along? As investigators began to sift through the debris, they were no closer to solving the puzzle. Each piece led to more questions. Every theory seemed to offer a different explanation. The debris became a symbol of uncertainty, a cruel, misleading trail of fragments scattered across an ocean. The flaperon wasn't just a part of a plane. It was a clue to a much larger enigma, an enigma that no one was prepared to solve. Yet, the search for MH370 didn't just involve the plane and its passengers. It also focused heavily on the individuals responsible for flying it, the pilots. And as investigators began to piece together the puzzle, one name kept resurfacing: Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. Zahari had been with Malaysia Airlines for more than 30 years, a seasoned professional with thousands of hours in the cockpit. He was highly regarded by his colleagues, known for his calm demeanor, his professionalism, and his apparent passion for flying. On the surface, nothing in his history suggested anything out of the ordinary. But as investigators dug deeper, they began to uncover things that didn't sit right. One of the most shocking revelations was a flight simulator found in Zahari's home, a piece of equipment that seemed to have been used frequently in the days leading up to the flight. The flight simulator, a tool pilots use to practice and simulate different flight conditions, revealed a concerning pattern. One of the routes programmed into the simulator was eerily similar to the final flight path taken by MH370. This was no accident. Could Zahari have planned this flight in advance? Could he have known exactly where the plane would end up and when? The discovery of the simulator sparked a whirlwind of speculation. Was it a coincidence? Or had Zahari somehow orchestrated the disappearance of the plane? Investigators also began to look into his personal life. Was there something in his personal history that could have driven him to commit such a drastic act? Could a personal crisis, a financial struggle, or a desire for fame have led to the unthinkable? The more they looked, the more questions emerged. But there was one thing that was undeniable. Zahari had been in control of the plane when it veered off course. However, the investigation into Zahari's potential involvement remained inconclusive. Some experts suggested that Zahari's actions may have been the result of a personal breakdown, a desperate attempt to escape something in his life. Others suggested that the actions may have been deliberate, a purposeful diversion, a way to mask the true intentions of those involved. But despite the suspicion surrounding him, there was no concrete proof that Zahari had intentionally brought the plane down. And that's where the mystery deepened. Could he have been part of a larger conspiracy? Was Zahari just a pawn in a much bigger game? Or had the seemingly unflappable captain of MH370 gone rogue, making a fatal decision that led to the disappearance of 239 souls? As the investigation into Zahari continued, one thing remained clear. There were more questions than answers. And the deeper the investigation went, the less anyone seemed to know about what had really happened that night. As the years have passed, the mystery of MH370 has only deepened. But with uncertainty comes speculation. And speculation, as we know, has a life of its own. While official investigations have produced little in the way of conclusive answers, a host of theories have emerged, each one trying to explain the inexplicable. One of the most widely discussed theories is that of a deliberate act by the pilots. Many believe that Captain Zahari, the man who was in control of the aircraft when it vanished, may have deliberately taken the plane off course, making the flight appear as if it had been hijacked or experiencing some sort of mechanical failure. This theory suggests a calculated move, a carefully orchestrated sequence of actions designed to confuse air traffic controllers and investigators alike. Others believe that the plane was hijacked, not by the pilots, but by someone else on board. This theory points to the possibility that terrorists or another group with sinister motives took control of the aircraft, overriding the pilots and diverting it to a remote location. The disappearance of the plane, in this view, was a well-planned operation aimed at carrying out a devastating act of terrorism. But these theories are not without their own problems. The lack of concrete evidence to support them leaves investigators with nothing but conjecture. After all, if the plane had been hijacked or deliberately diverted, why were no distress signals sent? Why did the aircraft continue flying for so many hours without a clear destination or any communication? One theory, though, offers a more tragic explanation, that MH370 suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure. Some experts suggest that a fire, an electrical fault, or some other malfunction could have incapacitated the crew and caused the plane to fly on autopilot for hours before running out of fuel. This would explain why the plane went off course and eventually crashed. But it also leaves so many unanswered questions. Then there are the darker theories, the ones that go beyond mere mechanical failure or hijacking. Some suggest that the plane was involved in a covert government operation, that it was taken off course for a secret mission, and that the plane was deliberately disposed of to cover up the truth. This theory, though fantastical, taps into deep mistrust of governments and institutions, feeding into the growing sense of skepticism about official narratives. And then, there's the theory that's too wild to ignore. The idea that MH370 never crashed at all. Some believe that the plane was somehow hijacked and is being hidden somewhere. Perhaps in a remote location, where the passengers and crew remain alive, held captive as part of some larger scheme. While this theory is by far the least plausible, it continues to capture the imagination of those who refuse to accept the official explanation. What makes these theories so compelling and so dangerous is the lack of definitive evidence. Without answers, people turn to their own interpretations of the facts. Some find comfort in a theory that fits their worldview. Others are simply desperate for closure, even if it means clinging to ideas that are far from likely. But regardless of how wild or far-fetched these theories may seem, they persist. They won't die. In fact, they've become part of the ongoing story of MH370, A story that, as much as people want it to end, refuses to be resolved. Theories will continue to thrive as long as the questions remain unanswered, and the truth about what happened on that fateful night remains elusive. As the mystery of MH370 lingers in the air, it's a tragedy that continues to haunt not only the families of those on board, but also the world. The disappearance isn't just a case of lost coordinates. It's a story of hope, loss, and unrelenting questions that no one has been able to answer. For some, the echoes of that flight are still present in every plane that takes off. Every time the engines roar and the wheels lift off the ground, we wonder, what if? What if the answers are out there, waiting to be found, or perhaps never meant to be found at all? But the search for answers isn't over. Theories continue to circulate. New technologies may one day unearth what's been buried beneath the waves. But until then, we can only imagine what truly happened that night. If you've been captivated by this haunting story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happened to MH370? Could the truth still be out there, hidden in the dark? Stay tuned to Gate 404, where we'll continue to explore the skies, dive into the mysteries that keep us awake at night, and bring you stories that demand to be heard. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and your mind on the mysteries that remain unsolved.